Welcome to Note Lab Mode. Today's Note Lab Mode is brought to you by Cloutfit.ai. Want to make your influencer content instantly shoppable? Cloutfit.ai connects influencer outfits directly to your product inventory, driving more sales and higher order value. Visit Cloutfit.ai, that's Cloutfit.ai, to learn more. So today we're diving into some recent research looking at a potential Donald Trump visit, maybe May 2025, to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar.
Right, and the big theme emerging seems to be this very transactional style of diplomacy.
Exactly, which, could lead to some pretty significant economic shifts, maybe geopolitical ones too.
Yeah, the analysis we've seen, policy papers, financial news, geopolitical takes, they all sort of point in that direction. Big potential consequences.
So our goal today is really to pull out the key takeaways from this research. What are we talking about? Commerce, regional industries?
AI, definitely AI. It's huge in this.
Yeah.
And, what it all means for regional stability, the bigger picture.
Right. We want to get past the headlines, understand the potential knock-on effects.
See how the pieces fit together.
Okay, let's get into this research. What stands out first? It feels like Trump's first term, his approach to the Gulf then, gives us a bit of a blueprint.
Absolutely. That groundwork was laid early on. Remember his first foreign trip as president? Riyadh, 2017?
Yeah, that was a big one.
Huge. Announced a $110 billion arms deal right off the bat. Plus, what was it, a $350 billion economic package alongside it?
So the focus then, especially with the Saudis, was very much investment for security, that kind of exchange.
Pretty much. And with the UAE, we saw that deepening economic cooperation that eventually led towards the Abraham Accords.
Qatar was maybe a bit more complicated at first.
Initially, yeah. Sided with KSIUE in the dispute, but then evolved. Qatar's just too strategically important, Al Udeid Air Base and all that. So engagement became key.
So this hypothetical May 2025 visit, it seems like it takes that same transactional playbook and just dials it way up.
Exactly. The scale is what's striking now. You're looking at reports of a possible $600 billion investment pledge from Saudi Arabia, $600 billion.
Wow.
Plus a potential $142 billion arms deal on top of that.
Yeah.
And then the UAE, they already have that $1.4 trillion investment plan in motion.
These are just massive numbers. It really underlines the America First deal-making focus.
It does. But it's crucial, like you said, these Gulf states aren't just passively accepting things.
No, they're active players.
Very active. They're tying these potential investments directly into their own national plans. Saudi Vision 2030, UAE Centennial 2071, Qatar National Vision 2030.
They need the partnerships, the tech access for those long-term goals.
Precisely. And they're getting more assertive, using their financial weight. The research even mentions them, playing the China card a bit.
To get better terms from the U.S., like technology transfer.
Yeah, or security assurances. They're learning to leverage their position in this shifting global landscape. It's a smart strategy.
Okay, let's pivot a bit. The geopolitical situation around this potential visit. May 2025. Gaza is obviously a huge factor.
Undeniably. It casts a long shadow, especially over any talk of expanding the Abraham Accords, like Saudi Arabia normalizing with Israel.
The Saudis have been pretty firm on that, right? Need a path to Palestinian statehood first.
Very clear. A resolution in Gaza and a credible path forward for the Palestinians seem to be preconditions.
And then there's Iran. Trump's whole maximum pressure thing, but also his talk about making a deal. It creates uncertainty, doesn't it?
Especially when Gulf states themselves have been trying to de-escalate with Tehran recently. It's a complex dynamic.
And then this news about lifting U.S. sanctions on Syria, reportedly at Saudi Arabia's request. That's a major policy shift.
Huge, with potential ripple effects across the whole Levant. Changes the power dynamics significantly.
So the Abraham Accords, they seem kind of stuck. Or maybe at a crossroads?
That's a good way to put it. Big challenges, but maybe opportunities too, depending on how all these pieces move.
And it really shows the link between the money and the politics, like Trump lifting Syria's sanctions.
Seems directly tied to getting those big investment pledges. There was that reported quote, "Oh, what I do for the crown prince." Kind of sums up the transactional nature.
A very clear quid pro quo. Gulf states use investment to push for things like U.S. support for their civilian nuclear programs.
Or access to sensitive tech. They know how the game is played.
But that Gaza factor, as you called it, still seems like the biggest hurdle for Saudi-Israel normalization.
It really does. Trump might dream of it, talk about a hopeful future for Gazans, outer Hamas, but his administration didn't really push Israel hard on the Palestinian issue before. So the path isn't clear.
So if we look at these stated objectives of this hypothetical trip, What are they trying to achieve?
Well, economically, it's pretty clear. Lock in those massive investments heading to the U.S., announce the big arms sales, and really deepen cooperation on AI. The reported CEO delegation, nearly 36 of them.
That screams tech and investment focus.
Absolutely, diplomatically. Expanding the Abraham Accords, ideally getting Saudi Arabia in, and then navigating Iran and Syria policy.
And for Trump himself, domestically?
Projecting strength. The master dealmaker image. Bringing home economic benefits, jobs. It feeds right into the Make America Great Again narrative. Connecting global deals to American prosperity.
Those international wins are meant to play well back home.
That's the calculation, definitely.
Okay, let's dig into the commerce and investment implications. This bilateral bonanza idea. Start with Saudi Arabia. That $600 billion figure is hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. And like we said, maybe even $1 trillion total if you add in expected arms deals down the line. They're talking about a new golden era, potentially.
Covering what sectors?
Energy, defense, tech, especially AI infrastructure, healthcare. Pretty much the key areas for their diversification.
And just for context, what was U.S.-Saudi trade like recently?
In 2024, goods trade was around $25.9 billion.
Yeah.
The U.S. actually had a small surplus, about $443 million. So yeah, $600 billion would be transformative.
And the UAE. They've got that huge $1.4 trillion plan over 10 years.
Right, and they're really targeting those future-focused industries. AI, semiconductors, advanced manufacturing, energy transition stuff.
Like that DAMAC Properties investment in U.S. data centers.
Yeah.
$20 billion.
Exactly, that's a concrete example. And U.S.-UAE trade in 2024 was already significant, $34.4 billion total, with a big U.S. surplus of $19.5 billion. So the foundation is strong there.
Qatar seems different. No single mega pledge reported, but still significant deals.
Yeah, more targeted. That potential $30 billion Boeing deal for Qatar Airways is a big one. Then there's the reported Trump family golf resort near Doha, about $5.5 billion, and that controversial offer of a Boeing 747-8.
So Qatar is focusing more on strategic assets, maybe? Maintaining relevance?
Seems like it. Their 2024 goods trade with the U.S. was $5.6 billion, U.S. surplus of $2 billion. Top exports to them were things like gas turbines, aircraft parts, key strategic stuff.
It's fascinating where the money is flowing. Tech and AI really seem central.
The absolutely dominant theme. Data Vault putting $20 billion into U.S. AI data centers. That big tech consortium, Google, Oracle, Salesforce, others, reportedly pledging $80 billion across the U.S. and Saudi Arabia. Oracle specifically committing $14 billion for Saudi AI over 10 years.
And the chips. Nvidia, AMD.
Huge deals there. Nvidia shipping thousands of advanced chips to Saudi entities like Humane and SDAIA. AMD collaborating with Humane on a massive $10 billion AI compute project. AWS and Humane planning a $5 billion plus AI zone. And the UAE's $1.4 trillion plan, heavily focused on AI and semiconductors too.
Then there's defense. That $142 billion Saudi arms deal.
Potentially the biggest ever. Focus on things like air and missile defense, maritime security, modernizing their forces. The aim is enhancing security, but
It raises questions about a regional arms race, right?
Yeah.
Especially with Iran.
it inevitably does. And also creates long-term dependence on the U.S. for maintenance, training, parts.
Energy is obviously still key, too.
Yep. A $5 billion U.S.-focused energy investment fund mentioned. GE Vernova's big $14.2 billion gas turbine deal for Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is still pushing for U.S. help on their civil nuclear program. Interestingly, maybe decoupling that from Israel normalization now.
And the U.S. pushing them to buy American LNG.
That's part of the mix, too.
We're also seeing U.S. firms heavily involved in Saudi infrastructure projects.
Yeah, Hill International, Jacobs, Parsons, AECOM, names involved in billions worth of projects. King Salman Airport, Qiddiya Entertainment City, big stuff.
Even healthcare investments come into the U.S., like that Michigan plant.
Right. Shemek Feed Solutions, a Saudi firm, $5.8 billion investment, including that 5E fluid plant. And aviation, Boeing selling planes to Saudi's Aviles, billions there too, plus an updated air transport agreement.
So it really looks like U.S. interests aligning with Gulf diversification goals, and the narrative back home is all about jobs.
Definitely. That $600 billion Saudi pledge is explicitly framed as accelerating American employment and prosperity. Defense, tech, healthcare, and Michigan, specific examples.
But the research does caution about timelines, right? How much actually gets spent and when.
Yeah, that's important. The UAE plan is over 10 years, for example. Headline numbers are one thing. Actual disbursement and net job creation depend on many factors. Global economy plays a role, too.
And how does Trump's bilateral deal focus affect dynamics within the Gulf? KSA, UAE, Qatar.
Could spark more competition between them, competing for U.S. favor, for tech access, for investment opportunities, especially in AI.
So the U.S. kind of becomes an unintentional referee.
In a way, yeah. Deciding who gets what deal, who gets access to which technology, it adds another layer to their regional interactions.
Okay, let's look at how this might reshape specific industries in the region. Energy first. There's that tension.
Yeah, between Trump wanting lower oil prices and the Gulf needing the revenue. OPEC Plus just committed to increasing production, which adds complexity.
And the Saudi nuclear ambition, wanting uranium enrichment capability.
Still a major goal for them, apparently now less tied to the Israel deal. Meanwhile, the U.S. is pushing its own LNG exports to the Gulf. Lots of moving parts.
Defense industry, obviously massive growth potential with that Saudi deal.
Huge. $142 billion buys a lot of capability. Air defense, missile defense, maritime security, border security, modernizing land forces, command systems. It's comprehensive.
Bolstering security, but again, that arms race risk.
It's always there.
Yeah.
And the long-term reliance on the U.S. for support.
Tourism and hospitality are booming across the Gulf, aren't they? Fits right into the diversification plans.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The numbers are impressive. Saudi Arabia hitting 100 million visitors in 2023, projecting growth. Dubai's visitor numbers keep climbing. Qatar had a record year in 2024 post-World Cup. Tourism up 25%.
And it's not just leisure, right? Saudi Arabia had millions for Umrah pilgrimage, Hajj quota increasing.
Right. And hotel capacity is expanding massively across the region to accommodate this. It's also about soft power, changing perceptions, building international links, even cultural partnerships like the Smithsonian working with Saudi Arabia.
Finance seems strong too. Corporate and investment banking revenues growing fast.
Yeah, research suggests 14% annual growth from 2021 to 2024 in GCC CIB revenue. Could hit $9,100 billion by 2030.
And Islamic finance is expanding rapidly.
Big time. Asset growth over 10% in 2024. Global sukuk market over $1 trillion, expected to grow further in 2025, with the GCC driving a lot of it.
And this financial muscle fuels the national visions.
Absolutely. It's essential funding. And U.S. firms are getting involved too, sector-specific funds, private credit deals.
Which brings us back to how tightly these deals align with the national visions. KSA Vision 2030.
They're hitting some targets already. Non-oil sector growth, unemployment reduction, growing the Sovereign Wealth Fund, PIF, the potential $600 billion U.S. package, the tech partnerships, the defense deals, they feed directly into Vision 2030's goals, especially AI leadership.
UAE Centennial 2071 and their AI strategy.
Same story. Future-focused government knowledge economy, global AI leader by 2031. That $1.4 trillion U.S. pledge and access to advanced chips like Nvidia's are crucial for that.
And Qatar's National Vision 2030.
Focused on knowledge-based economy, human development, using AI for productivity. They've partnered with Scale AI for government services, for instance.
So it's symbiotic. Trump's deals meet Gulf needs for investment and tech.
Pretty much. But there are risks. What if Gulf funding tightens? What if U.S. policy shifts dramatically after an election? It relies on continued alignment.
Let's focus specifically on AI now. The ambitions in the Gulf are really high.
Extremely high. Saudi Arabia wants to be top 15 globally by 2030, targeting SAR $75 billion in AI investment, thousands of specialists, hundreds of startups. Their LAP Tech Conference saw nearly $15 billion in AI investments announced just for 2025.
UAE aiming even higher. Global leader by 2031.
That's the goal. Building the ecosystem, integrating AI everywhere, attracting talent. They talk about wanting complete alignment with the U.S. on AI development. G42 is a key player there.
Qatar leveraging AI for productivity under its Vision 2030 as well.
Right. Partnering with companies like Scale AI, they all see AI as fundamental to their future.
And the chip factor. U.S. policy seems to have really opened the taps.
Yeah, that reported rescinding of Biden's AI diffusion rule is a huge deal. It allows much larger exports of advanced chips.
So the UAE might get over 1 million Nvidia chips. 500,000 a year.
That's the potential deal being reported. Way more than previously allowed.
Yeah.
G42 would get a big chunk.
And Saudi Arabia getting thousands of Nvidia and AMD chips too.
Right, for Humane, for SDAIA's planned sovereign AI factory. Plus that huge AMD Humane compute collaboration.
So the U.S. is using chip access as leverage.
Absolutely. It's strategic. Supply the tech to secure the massive investments, align Gulf AI development with the U.S., and crucially, counter China's influence in this space. It's a clear quid pro quo.
And they're building the infrastructure too. Data centers, sovereign AI.
Massive investments there. Saudi's Data Vault putting $20 billion into U.S. data centers and energy. Grok and Aramco Digital planning the world's largest AI inferencing data center in Dammam, Nvidia helping build a sovereign AI factory, AWS and Humane's $5 billion plus AI zone, Qualcomm involved too.
UAE also building out data centers. G42, DAMAC.
Yeah, G42 is a major player, partnered with Microsoft, and DAMAC's $20 billion US data center plan.
What's the appeal of sovereign AI?
Control over data, customized models for local needs, like Arabic language models, reduced dependence on foreign tech giants, enhanced national security, competitiveness. It's about technological autonomy and influence.
And this all plays into the US-China tech competition, with the Gulf as a key battleground.
Exactly. The U.S. is worried about China getting access to Western tech via the Gulf. So the Trump administration seems willing to supply advanced chips, but only to partners seen as aligned, like G42 reportedly divesting from Huawei.
Trying to outmaneuver China, as the research puts it.
That seems to be the goal. But the Gulf states are balancing deep economic ties with China oil customer, Belt and Road partner, but they need U.S. tech, especially for AI.
So they use the China card for leverage with the U.S.
It appears so. To get weapon access, nuclear support, tech transfer. Despite U.S. pressure, it's unlikely they'll fully abandon multi-alignment. The economic ties to China are just too deep. Trump might get specific wins, like on AI chips, but the strategic hedging will likely continue.
And the overall impact of AI on the Gulf economies.
Potentially transformative. Healthcare, education, energy, transport. AI could revolutionize them. It's seen as absolutely vital for diversifying away from oil key to Vision 2030, Centennial 2071.
And enabling those huge smart city projects, NEO, the line.
Exactly. Nvidia is collaborating with SDAIA on smart city tech. The success of diversification increasingly hinges on successful AI adoption.
Okay, broadening out again. Geopolitical stability, the Abraham Accords. Where did they stand?
Trump still talks about his dream of Saudi-Israel normalization, but acknowledges the Saudi timeline, the conditions, Gaza resolution, path to Palestinian statehood.
And for the Saudis, it's a package deal, right? Security guarantees, nuclear help, weapons.
Right. It seems Trump might be more willing to meet those demands bilaterally, maybe try to reframe the Palestinian issue somehow, compared to Biden's mega-deal approach. It's a different negotiating style.
What about Iran policy? A return to maximum pressure?
Potentially, yeah. But maybe combined with an offer for a new deal. Some briefings suggest talks might be happening. It clashes a bit with Gulf de-escalation efforts, but...
But the Gulf states might support a new deal attempt.
Reportedly, yes. Interestingly, Iran might see Trump's desire to reduce the U.S. military footprint as aligning with their goals. It's a high-stakes gamble. The Gulf is wary of escalation, so cooperation with maximum pressure might be conditional.
And Syria, lifting all sanctions, that's huge.
Massive, justified by needing Syria to move forward, reconstruction. Reportedly done at Saudi request, supported by others like UAE, Turkey. They see the new government under Ahmed al-Shara as potentially countering Iran.
And Trump might meet al-Shara.
That's the report. It's a major concession to Gulf allies, boosts their influence, opens Syria for Gulf-funded reconstruction, signals U.S. willingness to engage the new leadership to reintegrate Syria, isolate Iran.
But is the new Syrian government stable? What if it fails?
That's the risk. Big uncertainties remain. What if it aligns against U.S. interests down the line?
And Gaza just keeps simmering. What's the potential approach there?
Trump talks about a hopeful future, post-Hamas, wants the war over, hostages back, but hasn't really pressured Israel hard or pushed a specific peace plan.
Gulf states like Qatar are heavily involved in mediating, though.
And in planning post-war governance reconstruction, they expect to foot a lot of the bill. Past Trump ideas, like the Gaza Riviera, didn't go down well with Arab leaders.
Could Trump use his leverage? Pressure Hamas via Qatar? Get UAE involved in stabilization?
Maybe. He's a wild card. Has leverage with Israel, with Gulf leaders, but his public stance often aligns with Israel on hostages, avoids direct pressure. Gulf leaders will try to steer him, but it's unpredictable.
Okay, last geopolitical point. Intra-GCC relations and that China card.
Yeah, the Gulf is more multipolar now than in 2017. Yeah. KSA, UAE asserting autonomy, balancing the U.S. security relationship with deep China economic ties.
Trump wants to pull them closer, counter China, especially in tech and defense.
But they use the China relationship as leverage with the U.S. to get better weapons, nuclear help, tech. So despite U.S. efforts, full abandonment of multi-alignment seems unlikely. China's just too important economically. Trump might get specific concessions, but the hedging probably continues.
The research also flags some potential challenges and risks here. Economic sustainability.
Big question. Can Saudi Arabia really afford $600 billion plus Vision 2030, especially if oil prices fluctuate? And long payout schedules, like the UAE's 10-year plan, the gap between pledges and reality can be large.
National security risks, tech diversion, arms proliferation.
Always a concern. Could advanced AI chips end up where they shouldn't? Could arms destabilize things further? Could U.S. tech reach China via Gulf partners? Potential for an arms race? These are real risks.
And human rights, Trump's transactional approach.
Historically hasn't prioritized it. Focusing purely on deals without conditions could be seen as implicitly endorsing current practices, drawing criticism.
Geopolitical instability, lifting serious sanctions, shifting Iran policy.
Could have unintended consequences, upsetting power balances, creating vacuums, provoking reactions. The long-term impact is hard to predict.
And finally, ethical questions. That reported Boeing 747 offer to Trump from Qatar.
Yeah, that revives the emoluments clause debate, raises questions about influence, conflicts of interest, especially with Trump Organization business in the region, like that Qatar Gulf resort. It risks undermining public trust.
So wrapping up, it seems the potential Trump visit would really push U.S. Gulf economic ties, especially in tech and defense. But it could also stir the pot regionally.
That sums it up well. Transactional diplomacy is king. Huge deals. AI is central, aligns with Gulf visions. But all happening amidst complex geopolitics, Iran, Syria, Gaza, the Accords, and the U.S.-China rivalry playing out right there.
Yeah. So here's a final thought for you, for everyone listening. How might things change if the global energy picture shifts dramatically, or if there are major leadership changes in the U.S. or the Gulf? How would this whole transactional tide react to those kinds of fundamental shifts? Definitely something to think about. If you found this deep dive valuable, please do share it and subscribe for more analysis like this. Thanks for joining us in Note Lab mode.